Okay, the first tip is something that I learnt when I was working in community local radio. And that is when you're presenting a radio programme, pretend you only have one listener. You might have hundreds or thousands or even millions of listeners, but pretend you've only actually got one listener. And this makes the radio show seem far more personal. Now, this tip can also be applied to doing online lecturing. So to give an example, before you start your online lecture, if you spend a few minutes just visualizing that you only have one student, then when the lecture actually begins, subconsciously you will talk as if you only have one student, and this will make the whole lecture far more personal. The students will feel as if you're talking to them personally, and that will make the whole learning experience better. And it will come across subconsciously in things like the language that you use. For example, when people do online lectures, they often say things like, "Hope you're all okay. How are you all doing? Hope you all understood what I just said. See you all next week." Talking in the plural. It just doesn't feel very personal to the student. It feels like you could be talking to thousands of people. It doesn't make the learning experience personal to them. Now, if you visualize for a few minutes before actually going live that you're just talking to one student, then subconsciously you'll start speaking in the singular, and you'll start actually coming across as if you are just doing a tutorial, as if you're doing a one-to-one session with one student. And the students will be far more receptive to that. They'll learn a lot more, it'll be more engaging, and it'll just be a far better educational experience. So the first tip is, before your lecture starts, remember to visualize that you're just speaking to one person. Avoid using plural. Speak to them as if they're just on their own, as if you've just got that one student. Doesn't matter how many students you've got, just pretend that you've only got one student, and it'll just make your whole lecture more engaging, more personal, and it'll be a better learning experience for the students. Tip number two is actually the easiest thing that you can possibly do, and yet it's something that so many of us don't do in life. And this is a great tip, not just for online lecturing. It's great for job interviews, it's great for going out on a date, it's great for everything, and it is completely free, it's completely easy. It's something that so few people remember to do, and it's all the more important when you're doing online lecturing, because it'll make the student like you more. You may or may not have guessed what that tip is. If you haven't guessed already, it's really simple. Smile. Look like you're enjoying yourself, because if you look like you're enjoying the lecture, the students will enjoy it as well. If you smile, and I mean a natural smile, I don't mean a forced smile. If you don't feel particularly happy, think of something nice. Think about your favourite football team winning. Think about your favourite food. Just think about something that makes you want to smile and look like you really enjoy doing the lecture. Even if you don't enjoy it, even if you just see it as a chore, try to look as if you enjoy doing it, because if you enjoy your lecture, if you enjoy what you're doing, then the students will enjoy it as well. So just smile. It's really, really, really simple, and then everybody's happy. One other point though related to this: if you're not enjoying the lecture, if you're not enjoying doing this educational work, then I would suggest probably you're in the wrong job to begin with, because when you're engaging with students, you have to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, get another job. The third tip is about your appearance. Now, this might seem like rather a silly thing to say. It might sound very, very obvious, but when you dress smartly, you're not just representing your college or your university, you're also sending out subconscious signals to the students. The students are far more likely to be engaged with you and to find you authentic, to believe in what you're saying, to actually take you seriously if you are reasonably smart. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should wear a pinstripe suit and a tie or anything like that, but I know these days there is a tendency for people in education to be really scruffy, jeans and t-shirts and all that kind of thing, and that might work in some environments, but research shows that people are taken more seriously if they dress reasonably smartly. And another little tip is it's very useful when you do your online lectures to try and wear the same clothes. Obviously wash them in between. Don't wear the same clothes week after week after week, or you'll be a bit smelly, although the students won't know that obviously. But if you wear the same clothes, people actually remember you a little bit better. So try, if possible, to wear the same shirt or the same jacket, have the same appearance, have the same background. I've got this plain background. I'm going to talk about backgrounds a little bit later on, but just try to have some consistency in your appearance. Remember, obviously, you're representing your college or your university, but you're also projecting an image, and you will be taken more seriously if you're smart. If I work in business as well as lecturing, I also run businesses, and if I go to a business meeting, I always dress smartly because I know that the client is likely to take me more seriously if I'm smart. And it's exactly the same with students. They might be scruffy, they might be wearing their pajamas back at home watching your online lecture. It doesn't matter, they're looking at you. You need to look smart because they will take you more seriously. Obviously on online lecturing, this only really applies to your top half, so I'm wearing a nice linen jacket at the moment and a black shirt. It really doesn't matter what you wear below the waist. In fact, it doesn't matter if you're not wearing anything below the waist, as long as you remember not to stand up during your lecture, because that could be quite embarrassing. So tip number 3, it sounds a bit obvious, but do think about your appearance, think about who you're representing, and think about how the students are more likely to take you seriously. Tip number 4 is about lighting and the light source. Now, hopefully you'll be doing your online lectures during the day, so there'll be plenty of natural lighting. But make sure you've got your curtains open as bright as you can. If possible, go into your brightest room to do your lecturing. Have a light on if it doesn't create shadows, although some spotlights can actually make the situation even worse with shadows. And one really important tip, which a lot of people forget, is make sure the main source of light is from behind your computer. So for example, if you're doing a lecture near a window, which is always a good idea because you'll get plenty of natural lighting, make sure that you're facing towards the window and the computer camera is facing away from the window. If you don't do that, it will create a horrible shadow effect. So try to be close to a window, close to natural lighting, but make sure that you're facing the window and the camera is facing away from the window. The problem with a lot of computer cameras, if you're using a laptop, they can be very, very cheap and nasty. Even if you've got quite an expensive laptop computer, the inbuilt camera can be a little bit rubbish, and sometimes it's worth investing in an external camera. You can get them from PC World and online for anywhere from about £40 upwards. You can pay hundreds of pounds for a decent quality camera. But for about £40 or £50 you can get one that you plug into your USB port, and that will get far better results. But as long as you have really good lighting, then the camera that's built into your laptop should be suffice. But be careful about how you position your computer. Be careful about using any unnatural lighting. I use spotlights. I've got several spotlights facing me at the moment, but they have to be positioned really carefully, or otherwise you get these horrible shadows in the background. So if you are going to use artificial lighting, which I'm actually using right now, then you have to know what you're doing really. But the main thing, try to use lots of natural sources of light, and make sure that your window or your source of light is coming from behind the computer so that you're facing it. Sometimes though you do need to use artificial lighting. For example, in the middle of winter you might be lecturing when it's quite dark. It could be in the evenings if you're lecturing to people living in other countries and you've got a late night lecture. So there are lots of things you can do. One of them is to buy a couple of cheap LED lamps like the ones that are clipped to my computer screen. They cost about £10 each from a high street store, and they're very effective. If you want to go even further, you can spend about £25, go to your local DIY store and get an inspection lamp. This one is designed for car mechanics and engineers, I picked it up at my local DIY store. It does use a lot of electricity. It's halogen, so it's about 500 watts, so it's quite hot and powerful, and you will have high electricity bills if you use one of these. Or you could go for an outdoor style light. These are LED lights that I picked up for about £10 each. I had to connect them myself. I just used some old wire. Remember, if you use anything like this, these are designed for outdoor use. I use them indoors for filmmaking and photography, but you must remember to only use wire that has an earth wire as well, because the metal, and obviously we don't want any nasty electric shocks. So if you buy outdoor lights and use them inside for photography, they do give very good results, but just make sure you use the right type of earthed wire. The next tip follows on from the tip about lighting, and that is about the background, what is behind you. Now, a lot of people seem to think that it makes them look more intelligent if they have lots of books behind them, and there is a trend at the moment for lots of politicians and celebrities to be interviewed on Skype and on Zoom, and you see them on TV and they've got big bookshelves behind them, and it tends to be very distracting, because what the viewer does is goes like this to see what books they're reading, and you become completely distracted from what the message actually is. And some people try to make it all personal, so if they support a football team, they'll have some kind of memorabilia, or they'll have photographs of their family members, or they'll have some ornament that they bought when they were on holiday in some exotic country, or all that kind of thing. It's fine to bring out some of your personality, but the problem is it's distracting. You don't want anything to distract from your message, and that is your online lecture. If you're a politician, if you're being interviewed on the news and you're on Skype, then that's different. You're trying to show that you're a human being. You're trying to show that you have a personality, and sometimes, to be honest, I think people just have a load of books in the background because they want to look more intelligent than what they are. They've probably never even read half the books that are behind them. When you're doing online lecturing, you want a minimal background, as few personal possessions as possible, preferably what I've got here, which is just a blank wall. If you are going to have anything that sends out a message, then one thing you could have, which I use, is a wall planner, which is in my office at home, and that is subtly in the background when I do my lectures. And I suppose the message I'm trying to send out, and very subconsciously, is that I'm a very well organised person and I like to plan ahead, and obviously it's so far in the background that students can't read what it actually says. If they could, then they'd see that it just lists all the football matches and rugby games I'm going to, and pop concerts and that kind of thing, but obviously they can't see that because it's far enough in the background. But a wall planner's quite nice because it makes you look like you're organised. Maybe a few books if the books are relevant to what you're actually lecturing, but the best bet really is to try and keep a plain background, because at the end of the day, all you want your students to remember is your message, and anything that distracts from that message is not a good thing. For the next tip, I'm going to have to show you my office. And as you can see on my desk, I've got various pieces of equipment. I've got two laptops that I use at the same time. They've got two screens connected. I've got keyboards, mice, a couple of microphones, a little video camera. I've got the lighting. Hidden away behind one of the screens, you can't see it, is an Apple Macintosh computer which I use for my graphic design work. There's a wireless printer there. But there's something else which was very cheap and is probably one of the most important things of all. And so I'll zoom in on it and you can actually see what it is. It's a digital clock with nice big digits, and I keep that behind my computer screen when I'm doing my lectures. And it makes the world of difference for ensuring that you keep on timing. Timing is obviously really important when you're doing face-to-face lectures, but it's even more important when you're doing online lecturing, because your students, they might have to dash off somewhere else. They might have several back-to-back lectures. They might have seminars or tutorials. There might be all sorts of reasons why they might have to abandon your lecture and go somewhere else. So if you don't get your timing right in an online lecture, that's going to be even more of a disaster than getting your timing wrong in a normal lecture. And obviously for both lectures you have to get your timing right, but for online lectures it's even more important. It looks really unprofessional if you're constantly looking at your wristwatch or if you're turning around all the time to look at a wall clock. So having a big digital clock just behind your computer screen is a really good way of keeping an eye on the time and making sure that you got your timing right. Obviously the other important thing, really important tip, is to do a dry run. I always do a test run of my lectures before I go live so that I know roughly how long they're going to last. But having a big clock behind, it'll cost you £5, £10, and it will make your lectures so much better if you keep that timing right. Keep a clock behind your computer screen and keep an eye on it. Now while I've been talking, you've probably noticed I've been zooming in on some other items, and you've probably guessed what the next tip is going to be just from what I'm zooming in on now. That's right, sound, microphones. It will make a massive difference to the quality of your lecture if you have an inbuilt microphone swapped around for an external microphone. The inbuilt microphones are just not the same quality. Even on a very expensive computer, the microphones that are built into the computer are not very good quality. You can buy an external one for around about £10 from PC World, and it will make a massive difference to the quality of sound that you get. The one you're looking at now is one that I bought from PC World for about £8, and I just stuck a little bit of foam on top which acts as like a pop filter so you don't get that popping sound. The one on the right is a far more expensive one. This is one that would be used by professional musicians and professional filmmakers. That would cost a lot more money. If you want to spend more money, then what you'll need is one of these things. This wire connects a USB port to the professional quality microphone, so that'll cost you about £20 from an electronics shop, and then obviously one end you put into your USB port and the other end gets plugged into your microphone. But even if you go for the cheaper option, even if you just get the cheap £10 microphone, it will still make a massive difference to the quality of your lecture. There's nothing worse than listening to a lecture where there's echoes in the background, where the sound just doesn't sound right, it's all muffled, the voice of the lecturer isn't right. Getting your voice right is just as important as getting the vision right. So you've got the two options. You can get the USB style microphone, which will cost you a bit more money. You can also buy the headsets as well, although I don't like using those because I think it always looks odd watching a lecturer who is wearing a headset. I think it just spoils the appearance, but that is another way of doing it. This type of microphone, it plugs into the audio jack of your computer, so that's the sound jack where you'd normally put your headphones. You plug that in instead. I've bought a really cheap tripod, a camera tripod, and I literally stuck that on with super glue. It's as simple as that, costs virtually nothing, and it just makes a massive difference to the sound quality. And there you go, you just plug it into the audio jack. With these type of mics, you can also plug it into some types of camcorder. This is just a really cheap camcorder. I have a much more expensive one, but this is a cheap Kodak one where you can plug your microphone in as well, and then you can incorporate all sorts of video materials into your lecture as well. Well, that's the end of my tips for today, but if you've got any tips of your own, then email them to me and I'll incorporate them into my next film.